Hello, we are here for a class about gnocchi. Welcome to another basics cooking class. My name is Sam Maggi. I'm a chef and culinary mentor with Basics Market. And for this class, I'm going to do a couple kinds of gnocchi. And we're going to do a real classic straight up potato gnocchi that's just potatoes and flour. And then we're going to do a little more involved sweet potato gnocchi with some other ingredients added. We also are going to go over a couple sauces that are classically paired with gnocchi, pesto, and the twist with this pesto is an arugula pesto. And we're also going to do the classic sage butter sauce that is just delightful on all gnocchis. If you have questions as we go along, please ask and we will answer them as best as we can. So let's go ahead and get into this. We've got a lot to cover here, and it's all really fun stuff. So the first thing, I think we'll go ahead and start with the pesto and just kind of get this stuff out of the way. As you can see, I've got all kinds of things happening here. So for the pesto, it's nice to have a food processor or a blender. Food processor is nice with a big bowl to feed everything into. And so pesto can really be made with any sorts of greens. Pesto with basil is, of course, the classic, but mustard greens work, spinach works, and arugula works. And I really like arugula paired with the sweet potato gnocchi because it the arugula has kind of a nice sharp note, and the sweet potato gnocchi has kind of a mild and sweet note, and they make a good contrast. So for any sort of pesto, I just kind of do the same thing. I'll put my greens, and in this case, we have about 3 cups of arugula. It's about one of those packs you buy if you're buying it like the leaf sort like this, or a couple bunches, 3 ounces to 4 ounces arugula, a couple garlic cloves peeled, and then I have a 1/2 cup of walnuts, which I simply toasted in a skillet till they're a little bit crispy. And I'm going to go ahead and blend all that stuff up. And you can add a little bit, you can add the salt at this point. This is about 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. And as far as the seasoning goes, the salt goes, you can taste it after you put it together and see if you want more salt. Okay, so that was a real quick blend, you see. And then we'll go ahead and add in the olive oil. So I'm going to add in a little bit of olive oil, and you could use up to 1/3 cup. And it sort of depends on the materials. You'll be able to, after you go through this recipe a couple times, or pesto recipes, you kind of get a feel for the viscosity of the sauce, and you just want it to be kind of not really liquid, but you want it to have some flow to it. Now I'm going to go ahead and add in my Parmesan, and I've got a 1/2 cup of shredded Parm here. And so this, I'm going to add in, and then I'm going to adjust with maybe a little, I haven't added all my olive oil yet. So just to get it to that flow state again. All right, and there we go. That's it. That's a pesto. And again, you could do that with any greens you've got on hand. In this case, we're using the arugula. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and decant my pesto into a bowl here, and then we'll set it aside for a moment. You can see it's just so quick and easy. And of course, this pesto would be good on any sort of pasta. So gnocchi is it a dumpling or is it a pasta, right? And you'll often find it in the pasta section if you're in a grocery store or market looking for gnocchi. That's where it ends up. But it's an Italian dumpling, and we know gnocchi as a potato-based sort of deal. But originally there were no potatoes involved. The potatoes just came about as after Spaniards came to South America and Mexico and found potatoes and brought them back to Europe and Italy. And this is what Italians decided to do with potato. Now, so it originally dumpling, the gnocchi would be made with semolina was a common thing, and also maybe some old bread. You can use stale bread and rehydrate it, make a dumpling. But the potato really lends itself well. Now, also you can use squash. Pumpkin dumpling or pumpkin gnocchi is a nice dumpling. Anyway, so we have our pesto done. Now let's go ahead and make our classic gnocchi. So this is a super exciting concept to me, and I've been really looking forward to teaching this class. It's so simple. It's a 2-ingredient dish that is just very satisfying and really, kind of fancy in a way. And it's just all about the technique. But it is quite simple. So you have some potatoes. Now, this is the recipe, and I'm just going to verbalize it to you. I'm doing 1.5 pounds of potatoes to 1.5 cups of flour. And that is the recipe. You're going to salt your water that you cook the gnocchi in, that you end up boiling the gnocchi off in, and it's just like a pasta boil. But there's no other ingredients in the gnocchi. It's just the potatoes and the flour. Really easy to remember, 1 pound to 1 cup. 1 pound potato or whatever material you're using, if it's squash, a combination of squash and potatoes, sweet potatoes, what have you, to 1 cup of flour. So 1 pound to 1 cup. Here I'm doing 1.5 pounds to 1.5 cups or so, because it's all about the feel. And this is where, what's so fun about cooking, right, is you get the feel for these things. Now, what I've done with these I prefer Yukon Gold for gnocchi. It has a great consistency for it. You can use russets as well. Now, if you're using russets, I'd recommend baking the potato. Here, what I've done with, what I like to do with the Yukon Golds, and this is a real classic technique, is I just cover it with water, cold water, cover your potatoes, and bring it to a boil and then simmer until they're just fork tender. You don't want to poke them too much, because the thing with the gnocchi is you want to keep the potato or whatever material you're using kind of dry, okay? So if you poke them too much, a lot of water will get in there, and you don't want that. So you'll know they're ready when they just start to crack a little bit. You can see that there on the top view. They started to crack, and then I can feel that they're a little bit soft, and I did poke one. You can either use a paring knife or a fork, and just when it pops in there a little bit, they're ready to go. So I just pulled these out of my boil minutes before we started talking here. And so they're still a little bit hot, and that's where you want them. And you want to peel them and allow the steam to be released, because with the gnocchi, again, you want your potato or whatever material you're using to kind of dry out a little bit. And so that's where some of the gnocchi tools come in. Now, the tools for the gnocchi are not necessary. You don't need these things to make a great gnocchi, but they're quite helpful. When I first started teaching gnocchi classes, I did not have these things that I'm going to introduce you to. And the first thing is a ricer. So it's not necessary to have a ricer. You can use a colander, and this is what I did for many classes. And you just, and at home as well, until I got a ricer for classes and I got a ricer for home. And you can just push the potato through the colander, and I'm going to demonstrate that with the sweet potato gnocchi. Now, what's neat about the ricer though is it sort of fluffs and aerates, and it creates a lot of surface for cooling, and that cooling and steam release. So that steam release is what we're looking for to get that nice dry gnocchi dough. And we have a question, yes.
Hi, we've got a great question, Chef Sam. I'd like to know if the potatoes could be baked in the microwave.
Oh, yes, a great question indeed. The question is, can the potatoes be cooked in the microwave? And yes, the microwave works well. And I've done that with the sweet potatoes in particular. I've microwaved them with great success. But yeah, you can do the potatoes in the microwave, just same rule. You just want to get them to just tender, and then peel them while they're still warm. Let that steam come out. And you can see we still got a little steam coming off this, so that's good. That's great. And what I'm doing is I'm just going to rice, and again, you could be using a colander, pushing it through. Anything with holes kind of that you can jam a potato through will work. You can even whisk. You can, do what you got to do. So a lot of people will just use a fork, but the most deluxe way to do it is a ricer like this. And this is a real handy tool to have anyway in your kitchen. And they're not real expensive, but they're real handy. So if you think you'll get into gnocchi production a lot, get yourself a ricer. It'll pay off. It really is neat. And you can see how fluffy that stuff got, right? So let's have a look. So I have this pile of potatoes. Now let's look at flour. So flour, again, when gnocchi first came about, we're using different materials, any kind of grains and things that can be stuck together and turned into a dumpling. The preferable flour, the flour of choice, is this double O, and this is available in the basics markets. And it's wonderful for pizza crust, pasta, and gnocchi. Now, double O, this flour is from Italy. And in Europe and in Italy, they have a grading system for flours, which is from double O, which is the finest grind, to 2. The double O flour is going to be real fine, but it still has a lot of protein and a lot of gluten. Okay, so that's why it holds together so nicely for pasta and for gnocchi. So here's my first half a cup of flour, and I'm just going to kind of get that integrated into my gnocchi a bit. Gnocchi dough now, or potatoes, we're creating the dough. Another nice tool to have, and this one is pretty, I'd highly recommend you have one of these anyway, a bench knife, or a sometimes called a pastry cutter, something like that. But the trick with the gnocchi dough is you want to do a lot of folding. You don't necessarily want to do a lot of like you do with the bread dough, where you're really developing gluten. You just want to keep it kind of light on the knead and do some folds. So that's where this thing comes in really handy, because you can just fold it over. Now again, all we have here is the flour, the double O flour, and the potatoes, right? The riced potatoes or mashed up potatoes. There's 1/2 a cup. So since this was approximately 1.5 pounds of potatoes, it should take about 1.5 cups of flour. I think I started maybe with a little less potatoes, but again, it's all going to depend on how much moisture was in the potato, and that'll dictate how much flour you add. It looks like we have another question. Yes.
Ruby would like to know if you could use whole wheat flour.
Ruby is asking if you can use whole wheat flour to make gnocchi. And yes, you can. You can use, again, any sort of flour, ground up grain, anything you can think of, you can try to make a gnocchi out of. And, you know, it'll have different textures and flavors. And, you know, you can really, the gnocchi varies all over Italy and now all over the world. I mean, different countries have different versions of the gnocchi, and it's dependent upon the ingredients that are available to people and you know, what you like. So I'd go ahead and try it with whole wheat flour. I mean, I'd imagine it will be a little denser, but it'll have a really nice flavor. Yeah, give that a go. Whole wheat flour. So again, back to the double O flour though. But in the States, we have a grading system with the flour that's dependent on gluten. So you have like cake flour, which is lowest gluten protein, to bread flour, which is the highest. And that's how we grade flours in the States. So it's just a little bit of it's a different system, and this is a different kind of flour, the double O. Really, again, just great for pizza crust and pasta and gnocchi. So I am giving it a little bit of a knead and kind of doing the fold over and trying. I just habitually kind of get into bread kneading mode. So I am developing a little bit of gluten, a little bit you want, because you want them to hold together. But again, if you over knead your gnocchi dough, they'll become a little bit tough. And so what we're looking for is that often gnocchi is described as pillowy and light and fluffy and these sorts of things. And you see these words again and again, and it's all true. And that's what you're looking for. So yeah, more like most descriptions of gnocchi, you'll see the word pillow for some reason. And you know, so don't be making gnocchi when you're too tired, or you might fall asleep because they're so tender and pillow-like. Okay, so you can see we have a beautiful dough, and that took like nothing, right? And we're almost done. Can you believe it? Anyway, again, go look for the double O. If you or just all-purpose flour is great, or wheat flour, you know, you can give that a go. Whatever whatever you feel like. If you make the gnocchi, if you're not making it right now with me, and you make it tomorrow, Thursdays are traditional gnocchi night in Italy, and a lot of cafes and restaurants only serve gnocchi on Thursdays. Yeah, that's a fun fact. So anyway, so here's our gnocchi dough. Now, we don't want it to dry out, so having a tea towel or some plastic wrap on hand is good. And I'm going to go ahead and split the gnocchi dough up. And you can go into 4 or 8 pieces. I'm just going to start with 4, and then you'll see I'm going to end up dividing it a little bit as I move along here. So we're going to want to keep our floured surface. You just want some space to work now. And you're going to go ahead and start by rolling out. I like to call it a snake, or you can call it a tube, and you know, whatever you like to call it. It's a length of dough, and you want to keep it pretty even. So this is just a matter of rolling it out, remembering your preschool days and Play-Doh, and I mean, for all I know, you still play with Play-Doh, and that's okay. But this is an edible version. So when you get to a certain length, what it wants to do is it starts to wants to kind of start to get thinner in the middle. And what we want to do is kind of keep an even length. Now, gnocchi, the word gnocchi, there's could be derived from 3 different places. One, and the most common line of thought on it is the knuckle, and it's so knuckle, and a lot of people will use the knuckle to kind of dictate the size of their gnocchi, and it kind of looks like a little knuckle. Another is a walnut, is another word it could have come from, and it is kind of like a little walnut, although that's a little further out than the knuckle. Yeah, and we have another question. Yeah.
How thick should the cheese be?
Yeah, so Ruby, you can see, so what I did there is as it got too long for me to handle, I cut it in half again, and I'll probably cut this in half again, but sometimes I can get away with rolling one out like at this length, but you want to go down to about 1/2 inch in diameter. But you can see it starts to get a little wobbly, so I always just play it safe and whack it down one more time, and then from here, this is really easy to get down to 1/2 inch at this point. So one thing you will want when you are producing your gnocchi is a sheet pan. You can have parchment paper down, or just a little bit of flour or semolina, or even like a little fine cornmeal, just something to keep it from sticking. Now I have parchment paper on this deal, and one really cool thing about the gnocchi is it freezes so well. So you can do, you put in the effort of making it, and then you can freeze it, and then the next time you want gnocchi, it's really like an instant meal. So that's one nice thing about gnocchi. So you could have a gnocchi party and have your friends and family making gnocchi, and then put it all in the freezer. And when you freeze it, though, you're going to want to lay it out and IQF it, so individually quick frozen. Okay, so anyway, so we're looking about a knuckle length, or an inch or so length across the 1/2 inch diameter. And then the other tools for the rolling of the gnocchi. So you could just stop here if you want, and this is fine. And you'll see a lot of gnocchi like this. And this is just beautiful, and there's no texture on it. Now, to texturize it, you can use a fork, and then here's the other tool that I didn't have when I started doing gnocchi classes. And then a student actually brought me one of these, which is a rigagnocchi. Rigagnocchi, it's called, which is ridge and gnocchi. So the gnocchi ridger. And these are really nice to use. It makes it a lot easier. And so my student was like, you really need one of these things. And I'm like, oh, that is a good thing to have. But forever, years, I did it with a fork, and the fork works good, well. And so you just want to roll it over the fork, and you get these ridges. And so the ridges are, one, they look pretty neat, and then two, they kind of catch the sauce. And then you just leave a little indent as well with your thumb on one side, and then you've got the ridge over 3/4 and the thumb indent on the other side. And all those things create sauce catchers. So that's kind of nice. So that's how it goes, and you just kind of roll them out. You can see it's really easy to work with. And again, just potatoes and flour, nothing to it, right? And it's just, you'll get the hang of the texture. And so if you need to add more flour at any point, you can do that. So that's how that goes. That's the rolling of the gnocchi. Here, let's do a few off the board, just to, I'm so used to using the fork. I often forget about the board, but the board does go a lot quicker. Okay, so again, you knock these off, and then the board, it's like that. And the board has its own cool look, it's like a little barrels. The board will make, for me anyway, they give it a little more of a uniform shape. But I still stick to my rustic techniques. And that just means that they're not all exactly the same. These actually are dangerously close to being refined. So I might have to rough them up a little bit. But yeah, so that's your gnocchi making. Yes, a question.
Someone wants to see a little bit more clearly how you do it with the fork.
Oh, yeah.
Upside down.
Yeah. So someone wanted to see a little more forking technique. And let's do that. So I'll roll out another length of gnocchi dough. And then, of course, we're going to freeze this, or you want to freeze it before you cook it. And then you can drop the frozen gnocchi right into boiling water, boiling salted water. And that's where you're going to get, so there's 2 points of seasoning with the gnocchi. One, you salt your water, well salted water, and so it'll pick up some sodium there. The other is I like to crisp the gnocchi up a little bit in on a skillet, which we will demonstrate as well with this class, just in butter. And there you can season again, like with some salt and pepper, so forth. Okay, the fork method. So, you know, I kind of go back and forth. Like sometimes I feel I like to go off the back of the fork. And so again, it's kind of, for whatever reason, the back of the fork's not working great for me right now, but often that's kind of how I go. Well, there we go. What's neat about the fork is you can get some really nice deep grooves, and this gnocchi board is not terribly deep. I wish the ridges were a little deeper on this, because once the gnocchi hits the boiling water, it hopefully will poof up for you, and then those ridges become a little less. So if you have deep ridges going in, they're more likely to be predominant and catch the sauce for you. Now, I think most people go with the fork, like, you know, as if you're going to eat, and then you just finish. So you roll it over the tines and then finish with a little thumbprint. And that's a real traditional gnocchi shape. And again, you can really press it in there and get some deep ridges. Okay, so either way, however your hands want to do it, I'd listen to your hands and whatever feels comfortable, whatever, you know, try a few different ways. And like I said, you get a lot of opportunity to experiment with when you're making gnocchi, because as you can see, there's a lot of it. And that's also the beautiful thing, is you can do as little or as much as you want. Remember, it's a 1 pound of potatoes to 1 cup of flour. And then you can either take that down or up. And once you get the hang of it, you can just, you know, cook off a potato, and then just add flour, and just make, you know, use what you've got. Okay, so this would go into the freezer like this. As soon as they're frozen, you can dump them in a Ziploc or a Tupperware, and then they're good like for 6 months in the freezer. Pull them out whenever you want. Just throw a handful into boiling water, and you've got a really nice snack immediately. Now, let's have a look at the sweet potato gnocchi. I'm just going to consolidate my dough, and then I'll have some gnocchi making in my future here. And I can put this in the refrigerator covered like this overnight and work with it tomorrow, and I'll be in good shape. And yeah, another question, yes.
One for Ruby. Can you freeze the dough if you don't want to roll and shape all of it?
Ruby's asking if you can freeze the dough if you don't want to roll and shape all of it. And, you know, I want to say that could be tricky. I actually haven't done it. So I can't say, give you a definitive answer. I would shy away from that, in that I think the water molecules might do something weird. But you could give it a try. I mean, it might work. it might work. Well, if it does kind of, if you do that, try it out and you find that there's moisture coming to the surface, you can always just add more flour and you probably be okay. But it really is a good idea just to get them done, and you will be really happy, because then you just toss them in the boiling water and you're good to go. Now here's the sweet potato gnocchi, and so we have the recipe card for this, and this recipe's on our website with many other great recipes, basicsmarket.com. We have a ton of recipes and some cool like little skills videos and previous classes up there. So I would recommend checking that out. And this recipe will be posted tomorrow, should be up, and you can look at it again if you need to reference it. Okay, so the colander method, I'm going to try with this colander. It doesn't have a ton of holes, but I'm going to give it a go. So you need a good stiff spoon, and you just push the gnocchi. So if you've got a colander, you can make some gnocchi like so. And it's, it's a little messier and more time consuming, but it will work kind of like the ricer and kind of fluff stuff up. Yes, a question. An old-fashioned food mill. Someone's asking if an old-fashioned food mill would work, and yeah, that would work also. That's any way to kind of mush them, and a food mill will tend to aerate a little bit as well, so that's good. Now, with the sweet potato though, it's a little bit different, and I'm using garnet yams here, and garnet yams are actually botanically sweet potatoes, and sweet potatoes are botanically yams. But as far as how the nomenclature in this country, but I like the yam just for the color, but it is contains a little more moisture than a sweet potato, like a yellow or white sweet potato, which would work really well for this recipe as well. I'm using the yam for the color, and I kind of like the garnet yam has that nice sweet note. But you can use a sweet potato, like a yellow sweet potato or something like that, and they'll be a little drier. And again, that dryness is preferable because you end up adding less flour and stuff. But you'll see this gnocchi dough is a little different than just the potato flour version. And what we're doing is we're enriching it. We're enriching it with some Parmesan, some ricotta, and an egg. And I have this beautiful egg, Lulabelle's egg. We raise hens and locally here around the Portland area, and produce these beautiful Lulabelle's eggs, which are available in the Basics Market. Now for this one, I'm going to really shock you, and I just kind of go in, and this is how I like to do mashed potatoes anyway. I go in with a whisk, and what this will do is it really aerates it, and since the sweet potato isn't going to really fluff for us like the Yukon did, or if you're using a russet, same deal. So you got to kind of treat it, it's a little bit different. So there's like 2 cups of cooked sweet potato, and the sweet potatoes I roast, or you can do them in the microwave. And then as soon as they're done, kind of pop the skin open, allow the steam to come out. Okay, here's our salt, pepper, and nutmeg. Nutmeg is really a nice flavor in this. And I've got 1 egg. I'm just going to pop that into the deal there. And then I've got, what is it, I think a 1/2 cup of ricotta. Yes, 1/2 cup ricotta. And then a 1/4 cup of Parmesan. Yeah, we have a question.
Another good one from Ruby. Other than potatoes, I can't remember what other vegetables.
Oh, okay, so Ruby is asking what other vegetables we could use to make gnocchi. And boy, any kind of starchy vegetables. So you've got your winter squashes. Any winter squash will work nicely. Um, any potatoes will work. They're just going to all have a little bit different properties. But, as you can see, where you just kind of adjust to the vegetable you're using as far as your ratio goes of flour to material, to your vegetable, and add in material. So here I'm increasing the moisture even more because I'm adding the ricotta and the egg and stuff. But these things also are act as binders, which it's kind of cool in its own right. What you get is a binding and also a little denser. So it's just it's a different texture, and it's good as well. It's just, for me, the classic, like the potato with the flour, just like the potato flour deal, is really nice, and it's always kind of the lightest and fluffiest, and it's the simplest. But this one's neat just because there's a lot of different flavors in there, and you get like protein from the cheese and the egg, and so that's always good. It's a little more nourishing. Yes, another question.
Uh, How long do you bake the sweet potatoes and at what temperature?
Oh, okay. So sweet potatoes, if you're using, a traditional oven, yeah, I usually bake them at 375 or so. You can go up to 400. Leave the skin on, poke it a few times with the fork like so. And then they usually, and again, like these were kind of skinny guys, so they went pretty fast, like I want to say half an hour, 45 minutes. But generally, it depends on the size of the sweet potato, the timing, but you just want them to get tender. And as soon as they're tender, you can pull them out, pop open give them a slice, open up the skin, let all that steam out. And all right, so there's our first cup of flour, and then that's good to go. So the first written gnocchi recipe comes from Apicius, and he was the one of the first cookbook authors and a Roman cook. And like so many things, the Romans spread the gnocchi recipe around Europe. And there is a theory that they originally picked it up in the Middle East. But really, these sort of dumpling, I think the idea of the dumpling is just one of those things that happened simultaneously, probably in many parts of the world. And it's just kind of, let's put some stuff together and cook it, see what kind of grains and so forth we have. And then it really took off with the potato and the Italian love for pasta. Yes.
Is there a kind of ricotta? Is it whole milk or any brand?
The ricotta, I don't have a specific recommendation on that. I mean, it is nice to use a quality ricotta, and I do like whole milk. Just it has that nice flavor and richness. One of these days, I keep talking about doing a class on making ricotta because it is really easy to make and it's pretty fun to make. So how about that's a recommendation? Make your own, and I'll show you how one of these days. But yeah, you don't have to be real picky about it. It's going into this dough. So whatever you like or can find is good. But yeah, whole milk is usually a good way to go with this. And again, you can see I'm really using the folding method. So with this one, this one makes because what I did when I put this recipe together is I kind of based it around the egg. So you have the one egg, you know, and that one egg you're going to have to add a certain amount of flour, and there's just no getting, you know, I didn't want it to split the egg. So this one makes a pretty decent amount of dough, but again, you know, you just got to get some either spend some time yourself and meditate on building little gnocchi or gnocco. Gnocchi is plural and gnocco is singular with these guys, the gnocchi. So, but you can see this one takes a little more flour. We're going to probably add up to a 2 cups or so, but same deal, you just kind of knead it up. And then, you know, this one, I'm going to stop in a second just because of our time constraints. I'd need this a little longer, but you can see it's coming together nicely. And there you go. That's a sweet potato gnocchi dough. Really beautiful color. You can add other colorings. You can add like beet juice, make a red gnocchi. You could add all kinds of herbs, whatever kind of herbs you like. And you know, you can really do, there's the exciting thing about the gnocchi is there's no limits. And again, it's just getting the feel for the flour to your other materials, that sort of ratio. All right, so we'll go ahead and set this guy aside for a moment. And here's a nice bowl for it. So we can admire this for a minute. Yes.
Just a quick question about cooking from frozen. Do you thaw them or drop them right in the water?
All right, so great question and a really timely question. Thank you. We have a question about whether after the gnocchi are frozen, do you cook them from frozen or do you thaw them first? You can cook them right from frozen, and that works great. And that's what I've got here. I've got some gnocchi that I've had froze. I made these yesterday, froze them, and now we're going to drop them in the water. Now, the tricky thing about using, you know, the frozen gnocchi is what you're going to encounter is it's going to cool your water down a bit. And depending on the, I'm going to pull this sucker over a little bit and make room for the next section of the class, part 2, cooking the gnocchi. All right, here's the box to look for if you're looking for those Gwendolyn's eggs, local in the Portland area, delicious organic eggs. Yeah, another question.
Question is, do you have to let the dough rest before forming?
The question is, do you have to let the dough rest before forming the gnocchi? And no, you do not. You can start forming right away. And what happens is it ends up getting a rest anyway, because it's, you know, as you get it takes a little bit of time, or it takes me a little bit of time. I'm sure there's people out there who are faster, but it takes me a little bit of time. So what I've got here is some water coming to a boil, and try not to look at it too much. And what I'm going to do is add a good hit of salt in there, and just like you would with your pasta water. And again, that's where we're going to get some flavor. And then here I've got a skillet warming up, and I'm going to finish the gnocchi in the skillet with some sage butter. Yes, another question.
So someone asked to just confirm that there's no salt in the classic gnocchi dough that's getting its flavor from the salt.
Right, yes. The question is, was there any salt in the classic gnocchi dough, the potato flour? No, I really just, I classically, it's just the potatoes and the flour. And that's where I left it. Now you can add a little salt if you like. You can add, you know, and again, you can add things. Some people like to add an egg yolk. But again, you're looking at what your trade-off with the egg yolk, the egg thing, you know, which that's why I'm presenting two different doughs. So one thing is if you're a vegan, you know, you can make gnocchi classic with just the potato and the flour. The egg or egg yolk, you will add richness and it'll also kind of bind it a little bit, which is nice. What you lose is a little bit of the fluffiness. The classic with just the potato and the flour tends to be a little lighter and get the pillow effect and that everyone is so crazy about. So here we have some boiling water, and if there's one thing I've learned to do is boil water apparently. So here we go. So here's my previously frozen gnocchi, and they have thawed a little bit, but I can feel there's still some pretty frozen guys in there, but because I let them sit for a moment while we're chatting. And they're still kind of cool enough. You can see the water stop boiling. And so you just want that water to be have a good boil on so that it'll come back quickly. And I'm going to give it a little stir just to pick them up off the bottom. And so you can see they all sank right down. Now, as they cook and finish cooking, they're going to rise up gnocco. And then you're going to know that they're getting near done. What I usually do is after they float to the top, I give them maybe up to another minute, just make sure that they're firmed up. But you don't want to overcook them, because you overcook them and then they'll start to disintegrate. So there is, you know, and I'm making it sound scarier than it is. Really, it's just like pasta, the same deal. You just want to catch it, you know, when it's al dente, right? Okay, so here's my nice skillet, and what I'm going to show you here is a classic treatment for a gnocchi. It's sage butter, and so I have some of this. And this is another great product available at Basics Market, made by us. And this is Lulabelle's butter, and I'm using salted butter. And this is made from our beautiful Lulabelle's milk, which we also sell, and it's all organic stuff. This butter is really amazing. I use it constantly, and I always think, wow, this is such good butter, great flavor, just performs really well. And then I've got some sage leaves that I just chopped up. And so I'm kind of browning the butter, you know, whether I like it or not. This skillet is hot. But yeah, you know, a little brown butter sage is really nice. So I'm throwing a ton of sage in there, lots of butter, you know, and it's like a tablespoon and a half or so of butter, and a good handful of sage. Now over here, you can see these gnocco. They're coming to the surface, and so they're almost done. Just gonna let them simmer just for a moment, and then we'll pop them in here. Now, meanwhile, let's go ahead and look at this. So here's some of the sweet potato gnocchi that I made earlier. So that's that sweet potato dough. And I've already boiled them. And what I did with these is I just sauteed them in plain butter. And then, so this is the other seasoning point here. And what I did with these is I sprinkled a little salt over it while I had them in the butter. And then you can bring the seasoning up a little bit that way as well. Now, what I'm going to do is toss these with some of our, so the reason, and I should explain myself a little bit, I guess, the reason for the sizzling in the skillet is you kind of get a nice like crispy outside, and it's just texturally, it's really nice. And also it keeps the gnocchi from sticking together, which it can tend to get clumpy just because of its nature. It's delicious. So it helps with all that. It helps, it kind of creates a crispy Ooh, these are fluffy guys, all right. A crispy exterior. Look at those. And then it still has a soft interior. Hopefully your pillow is not crispy on the outside and soft on the inside. If it is, you might need a new pillow. I don't know. All right. Now, let's see what we got. I think this is a good idea to switch. You know, they say don't switch horses midstream or whatever, but I did it. So, I'm just going to toss these guys around a little bit in the sage butter. They're going to take on the flavor of the sage and the butter, which is salted butter again for seasoning purposes. And I'm going to sprinkle a little more salt, and I can sprinkle pepper on at this point too if I wanted. Yeah, another question.
What temperature should the water be for cooking the gnocchi? Boiling or simmering?
You have a question about the temperature of the water for cooking the gnocchi. Yeah, you want to bring it up to a good rolling boil, and a really good boil, because as I mentioned, if you're using the frozen, you don't have to freeze it. Of course you can go straight from fresh, but if you do choose to freeze it, your frozen gnocchi, when it hits the water, it's going to bring the temperature down. So you want to have it at a good rolling boil. And then as you cook it, you want it at a nice even boil, high simmer. You don't want to be destroying your gnocchi because it's like so rambunctious, but really you'll see it just like a rolling boil is good. Now you can see we're getting some nice color. And this is why I like to give it a saute, because you get color, you get flavor, and you get texture. And these are all things that we look for in some cooking, right? So again, let's go back to this guy. So here is our sweet potato gnocchi, and here's the arugula pesto. And I'm just going to go ahead and coat the gnocchi with the pesto. And this pesto, like any pesto, if you wanted to make it a little more like a saucy, you could add, you could warm it up with a little bit of cream and make it like more of a sauce. The pesto, of course, is beautiful like this. It's going to stick to the gnocchi really well. And there you go. You can see, hopefully you can see we've got some color happening. Now, a couple notes, again, just tools real quick. You can see I use this sucker. This is called a spider. And these are handy for pulling the gnocchi right out of your boiling water and then into the skillet, which is ideal. That's an ideal method to just do your fresh gnocchi. Yeah, another question.
How long will the pesto stay?
The question is, how long will the pesto last in the refrigerator? And the pesto, if you've got it in a covered, like in a mason jar or a covered Tupperware, you're good for a week with that pesto. And if it starts to oxidize a little bit, you can stir that in. It's fine. It might oxidize, turn a little brown on top, but that's just that is just oxygen now doing its thing. Now, so you can see we have a beautiful crisp, I think, I don't know if this is coming through on the camera, but kind of is, I think. Nice golden brown gnocchis here, and nice green gnocchis here. And to finish, I almost forgot, I've got a little Parmesan, grated Parm, which I'm going to sprinkle on those guys. Oh, and to finish, let me start over. To finish, I'm going to do a beautiful plating of the gnocchi in this lovely dish, and we're going to sprinkle some Italian parsley on there, some Parmesan, and that looks good enough to eat. And then this looks great in the skillet, right? And let's have a taste, see how it is. Hmm. It's all true. It's delicious. Now let's see how this one is. Fabulous. Fantastico. Delicioso. All these things. And so quick and easy, right? So I would say go out there, make some gnocchi and eat it and share it. And again, you know, it's something you can make ahead and freeze really well. Pull it out of the freezer, and then you have instant meal with little fuss. It's a great side dish. Any sort of grilled fish, meat, or vegetable or vegetarian protein goes really nice with this. Or it can be a meal unto itself. You know, with these lovely sauces, you can make the pesto, put it on your classic gnocchi. You can put your sweet potato gnocchi in the sage butter, you know, play around with it, add herbs and seasonings to your liking, and have fun and, you know, happy cooking.